Hello and welcome back to Creative Pet Keeping. My name is Kasha, I am your host, and today I am going to continue the betta breeding series. Last time where we were left off, we had a successful spawn with the Tancho pair. Now I did have a live stream last week where I kind of told you in depth what happened to the pairs. So if you would like the whole full story, definitely check that video out. The candy koi pair did not work out. The male would chase the female away when she was swimming under the nest and was willing to spawn just because he couldn't quite figure things out. So I tried him with the yellow female who was much more sassy, and I tried to spawn them in the bucket setup because I wanted to switch up their environment completely as well as switching up the spawning partners. And I did make some progress in a sense that the female would do what I was predicting she would do, and when he would try to chase her away from the nest when she was willingly swimming under there so they could spawn, she would flare him and be like, "What are you doing? Stop it." So that helped because that means that he actually stopped doing that behavior, and the progress that we made is that he would willingly have a female come under the nest and he would try to spawn, but unfortunately that spawn did not work either. So I wanted to try one more thing. Interruption from future Kasha. I also forgot to mention that while I was trying to spawn the yellow female with the candy male, the candy female was so eggy and ready to spawn that she started to drop her own eggs on her own, which females can totally do, while she was chilling in her temporary jar. So back to the story. Just to see if it would work out, and I decided to attempt to spawn the candy female with the Tancho male. Now, I wasn't sure if that entire spawn would work out either, but I knew that the Tancho male, because he just spawned recently, he had about a week of break after spawning. He had experience, so he knew what he was doing, and he was a pretty nice male. Like, he didn't really beat up the Tancho female, so I was like, this might work. So I decided to try to spawn them. And here is the footage of what happened. This time I tried a completely new spawning setup that I've never tried before, and that is to try to spawn them in a critter keeper container. This was the large sized one. I ended up adding a heater inside, some plants, a little bit of Indian almond leaves, as well as a little bit of foam on top to support the bubble nest. I covered the top. That's why you can see all the condensation that is forming at the very top, and the male and the female are doing their first attempts to spawn, which seem to be going well. I mean, the male does have experience wrapping. The female is very, very eggy as well as very, very willing. But if you pay close attention, you will start to notice that there is a slight problem that this male is going to be encountering. And you might not see it right away. This might become a little more obvious as you continue to observe the different clips, but this male had quite a difficult time wrapping this female. This is why we really have to take into consideration the size of both the male and the female. As you can see, the female is both longer than him, but she also is very girthy. If you look at around her tummy area, she's very, very full of eggs. And one of the things that can be very confusing when you are watching your pair spawn, whether it's your first, second, or third pair, if you've previously seen your pair wrap, they drop the eggs, they put them in the nest, and then you have a viable spawn. But then you try to observe another spawn that do the same thing, look like they have successful wraps, drop some eggs, pick them up, put them back in the nest, but yet there are no babies. I'm gonna tell you why this is happening. So every time this male is trying to grab the female and kind of flip her around, he wants to hold her in the right position so that he can directly fertilize the eggs as he's over her. But if she is too large, he can't properly hold onto her and position himself correctly. This can affect his ability to be able to fertilize the eggs. Therefore, the eggs that she's dropping are actually unfertilized. Usually betta fish know when an egg is unfertilized because they can taste it and will oftentimes just eat the eggs. The protein that they gain from this will help give them the energy to maybe continue spawning or partake in a future spawn. So you'll notice here that even
even though they're dropping a lot of eggs and picking up a lot of eggs, there's not a lot of putting back eggs into the nest. Of course, that does not mean that unfertilized eggs won't get in the nest from time to time. This was a funny moment that I like to point out, that I'm always worried about distracting my fish, and in this case the male got a little bit grumpy with me being in the way of filming and had to flare at me and tell me off before he decided to attempt to spawn again. So you have to be very careful when you are observing your spawning pair. Sometimes they won't care and completely ignore you. Sometimes they might get a little distracted, but some pairs need complete isolation because they will easily get distracted by anything, and that is why oftentimes people will breed them in containers that are not transparent, or they'll cover them up with paper known as carding. So unfortunately, even though this pair did have a couple really nice attempts to wrap, and I didn't show you, as always, all of the footage because these things usually take a few hours to complete, I think it was still very interesting to be able to film this, and the way I set up this spawning tank differently also allowed me, I think, to get a little bit of a better and closer angle while also using natural lighting from my window, which I thought was less bothersome to the fish. So I'm glad that I was able to still get this footage and share it with all of you guys. If there's something interesting that maybe you have noticed while watching this footage and I might not have pointed it out, but you think it's cool and everyone should know, definitely let me know down in the comments below.
We forgot that there is still one pair that we had to try spawning that was the last of my plans for the entire 2022 breeding project, and that was the star-tailed, the red star-tail pair. So I ended up putting them together. They are a younger pair, so they're a little smaller, but luckily they are a good size for each other. They were also the pair that came in sick, but luckily I was able to treat them and they were doing great. So I ended up putting them together, and unfortunately, even though I got footage that was pretty interesting for the fail spawn, I did not get the success spawn for these guys because that was the one time I had to go out to the store. That's when they decided to do all their spawning. By the time I came back, the male was tending to the nest, the female was hiding, so I removed her, left the male to take care of the babies, and then removed him after 3 days. And now we have 2 successful spawns that we can watch grow up, and then hopefully one of you in October at Aquashella, and that's happening in Chicago, will be able to get your very own creative pet keeping betta, and I'm super excited about that. So I think this was a very interesting spawning experience. I feel like I've learned a lot of new interesting things, and even though we had some successes and some fails, I see that anytime you have a fail, it's always a learning opportunity, and I think it's important to success at things, but also sometimes to fail at them at the same time. So with that being said, thank you for hanging out with me. I hope that you enjoyed this update, and stay tuned next week where I will show you how cute the babies are as they are growing up. Bye!